The Packers may have taken a break this week, but we're still rolling strong. The Green and Gold have a huge matchup this week against the San Francisco 49ers. We'll preview the game with a special guest, Yahoo Fantasy Football analyst Liza Loza. We'll also share your listener feedback and more on your Packers Fan Podcast.
And I'm Wayne Henderson here with you on the home stretch of this season of Packers football. Thanks for joining us on this 192nd episode of your Packers Fan Podcast, the show by and for fans of your 13-time NFL champion Green Bay Packers.
And I'm Scott Clark, and it sure felt a bit empty with no Packers game to watch this weekend, but there was still plenty of great football to watch. On this edition of the podcast, we have a special interview with Liza Loza. You might recognize her from Yahoo's Fantasy Football. She is an analyst over there. We're also going to have results from our weekly Twitter and Facebook poll question.
And the Packers are heading to Frisco to play the Niners. Let's preview that bad boy, shall we? Plus, we've got more great listener feedback coming up, and the show notes for this episode will be at PackersFanPodcast.com and in the details area of the podcast app you're listening to right now.
Without further ado, I'd like to introduce everybody to our very special guest. I've met Liz through a good friend of mine by the name of Sissy Jones, who I've met through the Gaming Outsider podcast. And you probably recognize her voice as well as her face from all the videos on Yahoo if you're a fantasy football player. Liza Loza, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Scott. Thanks, Wayne. It's exciting to be here, even if you are a Packers fan.
I know. I was wondering how long that was going to come out. Yes,
let's just get it out of the way.
Let's get it out of the way. Liz is a Bears fan. Liz is a Bears fan.
Really?
She was actually at the game this weekend, right?
Yeah, we have a complicated relationship, me and the Bears, as most Bears fans do. I grew up in Chicago, so I grew up a Bears fan. I moved to Los Angeles over a decade ago, and when the Rams came to LA, I have two little kids. I wanted football to be, especially since I work in the industry, to be a part of their, the cultural fabric of their lives so they could have a team to root for. My husband's from DC, so he roots for the Washington team. I wanted my kids to have their own home team, so we got season tickets. And then the Rams got really good, and so I kind of became a Rams fan. I like to say that the Bears were my first. That's the husband who doesn't know how to load the damn dishwasher after all these years. The Rams were like the sexy side piece, except now they gave up and got a little fat. So,
well,
meh.
Wow, I've never heard a football team described that way before. That's fantastic.
Yeah, the Rams were like the hot, young, new pool boy. And I was thinking maybe we'll dabble. This could be something. The marriage got a little stale. And then, Nagy's been on full tilt since Cody Parkey doinked off the uprights in the postseason of last year and decided to hold a damn kicker competition all summer instead of developing his young quarterback. And now we have phantom hip injuries. So great, go Pack.
Hey, awesome. I'll take it. Whatever it takes to get a go Pack from a Bears fan.
The best thing about being on again, off again with the Bears is that I get to freely root for Aaron Rodgers, who I adore.
Hey, we're going to get along just fine, Liz. That's great. Well, considering your current position at Yahoo, I have to assume that you've been a fan of fantasy football for quite a long time. Can you tell us about the path that landed you as an analyst at one of the most prolific companies out there?
Yeah, it's a weird detoured path, like all good ones, I suppose. It starts growing up in Chicago. My mom was a single mom, so my grandfather, who lived with us, was kind of my primary caregiver in terms of the domestic responsibilities. He made trips to all of my sporting events, Girl Scouts. In fact, I like to use this story because it's so, it just really represents my entire childhood. But in third grade for Halloween, and my grandpa was in charge of gathering and figuring out the Halloween costume, all the other little girls wanted to be a princess, and I was Ryan Sandberg. So
nice.
that pretty much epitomizes my upbringing. I went away to college on the East Coast. Unfortunately, my grandfather passed away before I was able to come home to say goodbye. It was in December, around week 15 of the NFL season, and I turned on the TV and was obviously heartbroken. And as a way to grieve, didn't just watch the Bears game. They were playing the Vikings. They lost. But I also then started watching every single football game, regardless of region. And then a couple years after that, and I just did that every football season as a way to grieve and get through it. I wasn't just a Bears fan. I was a football fan. And that helped me learn the different players in the leagues outside of the NFC North, basically, So fast forward a couple of years, I start dating this guy, and he's in this thing called the Fantasy Football League. I'd never heard of it. And he starts asking me my advice. And he gathers very quickly that I know what an MJD is, even though he doesn't play on the Bears. And I know what a Roy Williams is, even though, well, I mean, like, he was on the Lions at the time, so I guess it's a division. But I start giving him my advice, and I co-managed his team to a Super Bowl victory, fell in love with fantasy, was completely hooked, said, I want in on this league next season. There happened to be an opening. The guys gave it to me. I then won the Super Bowl the next year. They all balked and said it must be beginner's luck. The year after that, I won the damn thing again. One day, I'm sitting on the sofa with my boyfriend at the time. He is, by the way, now my husband. And we're watching Fantasy Football Live, the live stream on Yahoo Sports, while we're setting our lineups. And I look at him and I was like, why is this show got all these dudes? What? I don't understand. When almost 50% of the NFL viewing audience is female, why are there no women talking about this? And he, with a wing, like a buffalo wing in his mouth, shrugged his shoulders, wiped a little that sauce off of it, and said, I don't know, start a blog. So I did. I started a blog called thefantasyfootballgirl.com, and I started a Twitter stream, and I started a podcast, and I just started leaning into this niche industry. And before I knew it, the thing snowballed. I did treat it like a full-time job. I gave myself a content schedule with a video blog and written content and logos. And I had been working as an actress in Los Angeles, both on camera and in voiceover. So I used all of my entertainment industry acumen, I guess you could say, and focused it on the fantasy football and sports industry. And it snowballed. I was hired by a company called Scout, which was owned by Fox Sports. And then Scout, after a season with Scout, Yahoo noticed me and poached me, and now I am in my 5th season with Yahoo. And it's weird because I am a cast member on Fantasy Football Live now, a show that I used to watch from my sofa.
That's an awesome story. That's so cool. I can't imagine listening to a show for that many years and then actually being a host on it. That would just be fantastic.
Yeah. It's cool. I have a dream job for sure.
I'm a little jealous, not going to lie. Yeah.
Well, Liz, you are definitely the person that I need to ask this to. My kids and many of my coworkers, they play fantasy football all the time. And I've only participated once. I couldn't bring myself to draft any players that weren't Green Bay Packers. And I was told not to do it, but I did it anyway. And as you can imagine, I lost horribly that year.
That is such a Wayne Henderson thing to do, man.
It was.
There are no other players but Green Bay Packers.
But I am trying to figure out, why was that such a bad strategy?
Well, you have to diversify, right? Whether you're in finance or fantasy, you have to make sure that portfolio has a bunch of different pieces. For instance, if Alan Lazard is the Packers wide receiver 2, though there is some debate as to whether or not that's still MVS. Looking at snap share, I'm going to guess it's Lazard. But if he's the Packers number 2, how many targets is he getting per game? 4, right, on average? Right. Not great. But if he's your fantasy football number 2, you want more than 4 targets a game. You want a guy like Calvin Ridley, right, who's seeing a larger volume, especially now with Mohamed Sanu in New England and Austin Hooper on IR. So you want to make sure that you are getting the best pieces of the entire pool of players, not just from a singular team.
Not to mention you're going to have a 1 guaranteed loss the week that the Packers are on a bye.
Well, there's that too.
Okay.
That's just...
if I try again, I'll play totally different.
But it is fun sometimes, Wayne, because I know that you're thinking I love this crew, I love these, but what about revenge games? Those happen all the time. What if there was a Packer of years gone by? Maybe Jordy Nelson actually did something in Oakland, and then he came back to play the Packers. Or Randall Cobb, for instance, he's having a dynamite season in the slot in Dallas. I think he's had 6 targets per week over the past 3 weeks. He scored in multiple weeks here. But now if you roster Randall Cobb, even though he's not on the Packers anymore, you still have a connection to him and to a time, except for when, he tried to be the team's wide receiver 1, and we knew that he wasn't really a good outside receiver. But whatever. He was great when Jordy was on the field.
And what if the worst thing happened? What if Brett Favre left the Packers and ended up with the Minnesota Vikings? What if... Wait a minute.
Hey, pants on the ground. I'll never forget that video.
pants on the ground.
Don't you remember that?
Then from American Idol?
No, yeah, but then he did it. Brett did it in the locker room, pants on the ground, pants. But he messed it all up, and it was like some white man overbite for sure.
That's hilarious. Well, one of the biggest things I wanted to ask you, Liz, when you were coming, because you were such a fantasy football expert, I was hoping that you could settle an argument between a friend and I. We've got a bit of a disagreement about how fantasy football should be played. One of us is a fan of the head-to-head matchups, and the other believes that the only pure way to play fantasy football is straight total score. Just, week 1 to week 17, total score, whatever. Do you have a preference, and is either really the wrong way to play?
Head-to-head. I mean, this is a game that is based on the NFL. It is fantasy football. It's choose your own adventure football, but the rules of the NFL still have to be pretty much in place. And the rules of the NFL don't go by total points. They go by head-to-head matchups, and sometimes luck plays into that, and that's what keeps everyone guessing. I think the tiebreaker goes to total points. So if there are two teams with the same head-to-head record, then the team with the higher point total would be the one that is seeded higher.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, Liz. I now have ammunition. I can't wait. Go listen to the expert. I've been wanting to ask somebody, an expert in fantasy football, for so long on that. So.
Oh yeah, well that also just is. It's the same as the NFL, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's always been my argument. Nobody says, this team gets in first place because they scored more points, even though their record is losing.
Right.
So, I don't know.
A week-to-week proposition, fantasy is.
Well, and there's so many different ways to play it. We don't do a PPR in my league, so
no PPR.
I know it's
shocking. What is going on over there?
Hey, I don't manage the league. It's my brother manages it, and he's managed it for about 10, 12 years that we've been doing it. So
time for a change. I will say Yahoo default scoring is now half-point PPR. Industry standard is now half-point PPR, and non-PPR, which was the old quote standard, is a relic. I hate it. I'm in a dynasty league with that is non-PPR, and it stinks. But it's a dynasty league, so we can't do anything about it.
Can't change the rules. I hear you. Maybe it is time to shake it up. Like we had those default settings like you're talking about, and it's just kind of just continued on. But it's not a dynasty league, so we actually could change it if we need to. So maybe that needs to happen one of these years. But we'll see. I'm currently in second place in my league.
Congrats.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I actually use I use a crazy app to help me with my picks and stuff at the beginning of the year, and I'm one of those that obsessively pores over it. But I also only did one league this year. At one point I was doing I think the most I did was 4 leagues in a year, and it just became not fun to try to manage that many at a time. But yeah. I don't hold a candle to my father-in-law. No exaggeration. He's in 30 leagues. 30
leagues.
30 fantasy football leagues.
Right now?
Right now. And he actually called me up on the phone about an hour ago when I was prepping for this episode. Hey, just want to call and see how your fantasy football league was going. We're not in a league together.
He has 30 leagues and he couldn't even be with you in one?
Well, he was in our league last year. You're not
getting the family business, Scott. Let me tell you.
Well, he raises chickens, so...
okay.
But yeah, 30 leagues. It's just kind of insane to me that he has that many. But I'm really excited. I'm nervous going into this week because Marlon Mack hurt his hand this week. He was my starter, and my other running back is questionable at this point. So I'm a little nervous as to whether or not he's going to be playing.
Who's your other running back? Who's your RB2?
Jacobs.
Oh, Josh Jacobs, because he's been playing with that shoulder injury, but I think he's going to be fine. The matchup is tough against the Jets, though. I like that you mentioned this because I feel like you're probably going to ask me for some sleepers, and I feel like I can help you out and also touch on that Jets matchup with the Raiders.
Oh, all right. Go ahead. I'm all
You want to
ears.
do it now? All right, let's do it
Sure.
now. Not that I host the show, but I just took over. Let's go.
That's fine.
All right, so if you're looking for a running back, I don't know. So this is a divisional player. He's in the NFC North, so I don't know if Wayne's going to okay this for you if he has any say. But Bo Scarborough on the Lions was elevated. Well, he was signed to the team, and in a subsequent personnel move, Paul Perkins was released to make room for him. Now, everybody spent all of their fab money on Ty Johnson a couple of weeks ago, and then we're totally blindsided when something called the Trey Carson, who you're familiar with, Trey Carson, former Packer, in fact, carried the ball many more times, leading the way for Ty Johnson. You have J.D. McKissick also on the squad, but he's more of a third down, passing downs back for the team. Anyway, Bo Scarborough showed well. Now, a lot of people said that might be because he was in a bit of a revenge game situation against the Cowboys. I'm not buying it. This is a big back from Alabama. Maybe he's not very explosive or slippery, more of a power runner, as Alabama often produces. But he's got the Washington Redskins this week, and that is a prime matchup. So he is very cheap in DFS, that's daily fantasy, and he was probably the number one priority waiver wire pickup. So if someone in your league missed out on adding him or there was a fab issue, I think Bo Scarborough could be very helpful to you with Marlon Mack out.
Yeah, I actually tried to pick him up, but I was under the wire in waiver priority, so I did not.
What about Jonathan Williams? Did you try to go for him?
Jonathan Williams?
He's the backup in theory to Marlon Mack, though Jordan Wilkins was out weeks 10 and 11, so I'm not quite sure if Jonathan Williams' volume is going to stay, but though they do play on Thursday night, so it's also unclear as to whether or not Jordan Wilkins is going to get healthy in time, and if he does, then Williams is sharing the backfield and essentially the volume, you know?
Yeah, I did look at him as well, and unfortunately, he was picked up by somebody else in my league, who ironically, or not ironically, but coincidentally, is the next question that we have from our community, believe it or not.
All right.
How's that for a segue?
That's working it like a pro. Yeah, super fan Aaron Peterson. He's kind of already planning for next year because he says that most fantasy football players take a wide receiver or a running back in the first round versus a high-tier quarterback, which Aaron Peterson, would argue can be the smarter long-term play. Where do you stand on first-round draft picks?
Well, I don't understand the theory that a quarterback will be the long-term upside play given so much depth at the position. Now, I also understand as I say that we are in a weird upside down sort of season where so many of these starters have been benched due to injury or, hello, Mitch Trubisky, poor play. I mean a hip injury. And but if you look at the amount of points, right, like Lamar Jackson is right now the number one overall fantasy producer at the position, averaging, he's averaging about 28 fantasy points per game. Right behind him is Dak Prescott with 25 points per game. But then let's go down. You've got like Kirk Cousins, who's averaging about 18 points per game and is like the 8th best quarterback. So yes, there's a giant jump from the QB1 to the QB2, but you're still going to get 18 points per game out of a QB8 that is drafted in the much later rounds of your draft. I think Kirk Cousins was going around, round 8 of most fantasy drafts, whereas if you look at running back, now it's always difficult because as we saw with Saquon Barkley, who missed time with an injury, like some of this, it's a really volatile position, but Christian McCaffrey is the number one overall fantasy producer at the running back position, and he is averaging a disgusting 27 points per game, whereas Dalvin Cook is the second most productive player, and he is averaging 21 points per game. That's a 6-point dip in between. Yes, that's a big chasm, but then after that, everything is much closer. But still, like Aaron Jones, who's the number 3 producer, is averaging 19 fantasy points per game. So the number 3 running back is giving you 19 points per game. The number 8 quarterback that you draft much, much later is giving you the same number of points per game. So if you look at the 8th or 9th best running back, they're giving you maybe not even 15 points per game. So it's just such a top-heavy group that you want to try and get. The position is so scarce that you want to try and get the best producers possible because the chasm between number 1 and number 8 is so great. But at quarterback, there isn't as much of a chasm between the top and the bottom. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, especially with a season like this where there were so many quality quarterbacks. I mean, we're just very quarterback rich this season. And, it's not quite the same with running backs. That's an interesting take, and I appreciate the perspective. We have that argument at our draft every year, by the way.
I think people like quarterbacks because they're more the name recognition aspect of that.
Oh, yeah. But, appreciate you answering that. Mm-hmm. Looking forward to hearing what Aaron has to say about that.
Can I give you 2 more sleepers before we move to the preview?
Oh, sure.
All right. One other one, because we talked about the Raiders at the Jets, is Hunter Renfrow. He's a player who's come on. He's a rookie, Probably if you watch Hard Knocks, you saw him because he looks like a 40-year-old dad, but he's not. He really impressed me at the Senior Bowl, in fact, which is when he got on my radar. Smaller guy out of Clemson, but an incredibly good in contested catch situations. And he's also pretty decent after the catch, too. But he has managed, my goodness, between 6 and 7 targets over his last 3 weeks. And he scored in week 9. He scored in week 8. He's coming on strong. I also feel like we've seen one of the issues is a Josh Jacobs owner. You know this. Jacobs isn't as involved in the passing game as a lot of fantasy owners would like him to be. But that's also because Hunter Renfrow has been using that underneath stuff, has been targeted in the slot. He's the slot guy. And we also know that Derek Carr likes to check down a whole bunch in his rapport with Hunter Renfrow. And Hunter Renfrow's, ability to play at a pro level, his number of reps is obviously growing. And so he is getting a larger role in this offense. And against the Jets, the Jets are giving up the second most fantasy points to the wide receiver position. His matchup is likely going to be against Brian Poole, who is allowing a passer rating of 115. So I like that as a sneaky start because Renfro's not really on the radar. Finally, at tight end, that's another, similarly to running back, just an awful scorched earth landscape because of lack of depth, injuries, a whole bunch of stuff. But I want people to keep an eye on Jacob Hollister. He's coming off of a bye, so he was kind of forgotten about. He's the replacement for Will Dissly in Seattle. He's at Philadelphia. He has put up 3 touchdowns and 2 top 5 fantasy finishes over his last pair of games. And since week 9, in fact, he's garnered over 80% of the team's snap share. He's drawn at least 6 looks. I like him against the Eagles. The Eagles gave up, let's not forget, last Sunday, week 11, 5 catches to the Patriots conglomeration of tight ends. So, and the Patriots obviously have a giant hole at that position, and they still gave up 5 catches total. So I think Jacob Hollister, who also is in a great spot because he plays on the field with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, so he's never going to be double covered, and he has Russell Wilson at quarterback, is a great stream. I have him as my tight end 7 on the week.
Nice. I was looking for some tight end advice because I got Travis Kelce on bye this week. So really appreciate it. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the upcoming game. And before we ask you some direct questions from us, we got one from another listener by the name of Jared Mancini-Kerr. And he says, what do you expect to see from a coaching perspective on both teams Sunday night in Frisco, specifically regarding that this game is in essence master versus apprentice with Shanahan versus LaFleur? What are your thoughts on that?
I love that he's mentioning the coaching tree here. And it's interesting because what has been the key up until this game against Arizona in week 11 for the 49ers, what has been the key to this offense? The run game, right? As soon as the run game gets going, that's what Kyle Shanahan, whose father, obviously, the Shanahan scheme is synonymous with backfields in the NFL, and nobody does it better currently than Kyle. But it's also interesting because Matt LaFleur clearly likes to lean on the run. Now, I wish for fantasy and for, real life purposes, I guess, as well, he'd be a little bit more decisive about who gets to be the lead back, because we saw him in Tennessee last year waffle until he finally gave up on the Deion Lewis experiment and just leaned into Derrick Henry around week 14. And my goodness, that was great. So I think the 49ers defense has shown some holes, if you will, over the last few weeks. And their run defense definitely looks vulnerable. So I think LaFleur is going to want to lean on that and lean on Aaron Jones with Jamal Williams as the RB2. I also think the thing Arizona did, and they barely lost that game, right? Like, that was a really close game. The thing they were able to do was stop the run. So they shut down the engine of the 49ers offense, and they said, okay, Jimmy G, you're pretty, but can you throw it? By the way, from Rolling Meadows, shout out to the Mustangs. Nice Midwestern rough there. But they dared him to throw it. He did throw for over 400 yards, and he was able to carry the game. But we know he has a tendency to turning over the ball, and he did have a couple of turnovers. So I think that, and we know that the Packers can blitz. Like, the Packers defense is a little Jekyll and Hyde, because some weeks it would look like you could run on them for a while, and then they, made some adjustments to their D-line and their linebacking core and reprioritized some pieces. And then it was the pass defense that was really struggled a little bit. But I think that the priority for Mike Patton is going to be slowing down the run of the 49ers and making Jimmy G beat the Packers secondary.
And not to mention the sacks too are a factor because got to keep Rodgers standing.
Please.
Yeah.
And Liz, we know you're not exactly rooting for Green Bay here. Okay, we get it. You're a Bears fan. But other than the run and the defense, are there some other things maybe the Packers might do on offense that could lead to victory this Sunday against the Niners?
Well, I think the Packers are going to win this game because if I'm looking at I think Shanahan also knows that Matt LaFleur is prioritizing his run defense, or his running game rather. But he also knows that he has Aaron Rodgers under center. But the receiving corps in Green Bay is not fantastic. Devontae Adams is finally healthy and he started to look good, but we know that, and they're coming off a bye, so I do think that's very helpful. But as I alluded to earlier, who's the team's wide receiver too? You can't. Jimmy Graham's a little bit washed. I hate to say it, but he's not the same as he was. And so I think the challenge for the Packers is if the 49ers do shore up the run, which we haven't seen yet, but if they are able to do it, then which receiver here beyond Devontae Adams can help carry the offense? Or is it just going to be Devontae and Aaron Rodgers all day long and a lot of Aaron Jones? I mean, that's pretty much, I see those three pieces and not really everything else is ancillary.
Very cool. And what's your predictions for the matchup? Who do you think? Do you think the Pack will get the W, and what's your score prediction?
I do think the Packers are going to win because, like I said, I think Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback, and they're coming off bye, and they're rested, and these 49ers have had two very close games in a short span of time. And if you look for a score, well, the line on this game opened at about 45, and it has since moved to 47.5. So it is moving towards a higher scoring game, but I don't think it's going to be because both teams are going to want to establish the run, as we've talked about already. So I would probably take the over on 47, but not by much. Maybe a 24. Actually, I'm going to take the under. I'm going to do 24-20, something like that. Pack.
I like it.
Spoiler alert, Wayne. It's very close to my prediction. Just saying.
What's yours?
Mine is 23-20.
Okay.
So very
23
close.
is probably a better number because I don't know where I'm getting all those even numbers.
And Scott
Spoiler
will
alert,
attest to the fact that I would like to predict something like 51 to nothing, but in reality, I'm thinking it's going to be more like 30-24.
Just to give you an idea here, Liz, Wayne has yet to pick anybody but the Packers to win this season.
And
we have a little running record to see who has better picks, and we're currently at 4-4, but he's never picked the opposing team once.
in 9 years of doing this podcast.
I mean, we've definitely established that Wayne has Packers pride through and through.
Oh, yeah.
And then Scott
From
uses
fantasy
his head
football
now and
to
then.
real life football.
There you go. I do what I can.
Do you guys think the Packers are going to win too?
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
I do.
I mean, Scott, do you think the Packers are going to win?
Yes, I do. I will be picking the Packers this week. We'll get to that later in the show for sure. But I do. Yeah, 23-20 was my prediction, and only reason I brought it up because it was so close to you, so I feel justified in my answer a little bit. I'm cool. 1 point away from the expert.
Cool. Well, your math is probably better, so.
His math is stellar. His math is really good.
Yeah, I teach math, so what can I say?
Okay, well now I feel better that I was that close to a math teacher. We're even.
And you already covered sleeper picks. Are there any other last-minute tips as we head into the playoffs that fantasy players should look at? Is it too late to do anything?
Oh, it's never too late to do anything. I mean, I will just say I am very excited to see the Ravens at the Rams. Lamar Jackson is completely changing the game, and it is a joy to watch. Like I mentioned earlier, was at the Rams-Bears game on Sunday night for Week 11, and I just watch. I have an opportunity to go to this game, although I don't know if I'm going to be able to because of my work schedule, and watching not just Lamar Jackson do his thing, but furthermore, seeing Greg Roman and Harbaugh and this entire Ravens franchise build an offense around a player's unique skill set is absolutely what I want to scream from the mountaintops and say to other organizations, like, look what you could be doing. And we're also seeing these college concepts, the spread offense concepts, obviously, that Cliff Kingsbury brought to Arizona with Kyler. And I just feel like the running back position is evolving in such a crazy way. Deshaun Watson as well. And I feel like the league is going through an evolution at the quarterback position, which is the most important position in football. Sorry, cornerbacks, but that's the truth. And I'm really excited to see how things unfold as we move forward, and also how these teams strive to keep these mobile quarterbacks healthy, because part of me is a little bit concerned about, yes, Lamar is electric, but what happens when he gets hurt? We saw what happened to RG3. We saw what happened, to a lesser extent, but you could there's some parallel with like Donovan McNabb, for example, right? He was a running quarterback till he hurt his knee and then he didn't feel like it anymore. We've seen what Mike Vick did, and that's always the comp that people use to Lamar Jackson, but Mike Vick didn't have Greg Roman drawing up schemes and building all of these pieces just around him to elevate what he did best, right? So I'm really excited for the Monday night game, and I'm excited that it's on prime time so that everyone can once and for all say that Lamar is the truth and not just an elevated running back, but he is also learning how to throw the ball, and his anticipation and touch is getting better week in and week out.
So a Packers-Ravens Super Bowl would be intense.
I know who I'm rooting for, but yeah. Wouldn't you prefer a Packers Chiefs Super Bowl? Because to me, Mahomes is a more new school Rodgers, and Lamar is his own thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Plus a Packers Chiefs Super Bowl rematch of Super Bowl I and all that hype would be fun, but I don't think it's going to go that way. The Ravens look unstoppable in the AFC.
They do, but the Patriots always know how to adjust.
You said adjust. I'm going to say adjust in air quotes, but that's a whole nother story.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, Liz, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for being our guest. It's been great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me on, and thanks for being flexible with my schedule. I know it's a little bit nutty, and you're not going to get a Go Pack Go on me. Sorry. That's
all right. I totally understand. Totally understand. Well, where can our listeners follow you on social media as well as the internet?
Sure. Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Liz Loza, LIZLOZA_FF. That's at Liz Loza _FF. And I have the same handle on Instagram. So that all works. And you can also you can watch me and the Fantasy Football Live crew every Sunday, 90 minutes before kickoff on Yahoo Sports. I also do a show on Mondays called Cover 3 with Kimberly Martin and Michelle Gringus. And the three of us, we're going to have a special guest in studio on this Monday. If any of your listeners happen to be a Bachelorette fan, that's a hint. And I don't know if there's much crossover, but maybe. And we do a show, and Cover 3 is also on Yahoo Sports. You can either watch it on the app or on the desk on site. And that kicks off at 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern, just ahead of Monday Night Football.
Very cool. Well, like I said, Liz, it's been a pleasure. It was a joy to talk to you, and I appreciate the fantasy football advice. And thanks again for the advice on McLaurin a couple weeks ago. That helped. That saved me that week. So yeah.
I think he's going to be his box score wasn't great last week with Dwayne Haskins, although they were teammates in college. But he had a 60-something-year-old, Jesus, I'm thinking about Madonna, a 60-something-yard pass pulled back because of a penalty. So I think McLaurin might surprise in week 12 again.
He's in my starting lineup right now, so fingers crossed.
Flex him.
Yeah,
all right.
Sure. All right, Wayne, you got anything you want to say before we head out?
No, I'm good. I think that next season I will try fantasy football again.
That's the best thing you could have said, Wayne, other than go Bears.
Well, I'm going to try fantasy football again.
Okay.
Yeah, the day you get that out of Wayne
would only be if there was, heaven forbid, a Bears-Patriots Super Bowl.
Oh man, yeah, I don't know who I would root for at that point, honestly. But
hashtag not my Super Bowl. But
awesome.
Well, Liz, thanks again, and you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll keep an eye out for you on Yahoo.
Okay, thanks so much, guys. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.
Well, that was an awesome time talking with Liz. She was so much fun to talk to. Didn't you think, Wayne?
Absolutely. I learned a lot. I am amped up, and I do know that some of my coworkers and my kids that play fantasy football, they are going to enjoy that interview and take some things to heart. Maybe they can all win the Super Bowl of fantasy football this year.
There you go. Well, let's go ahead and get to some listener feedback for the rest of this episode here. Steven chimes in and says, checking in from Palace Park. Scott, at Culver's, do you save some room for their ice cream? Well, Steven, it's actually frozen custard, not ice cream. So just saying, but yes, there's always room for frozen custard. You know you're in Wisconsin when they entice you with ice cream by putting butter in it. I mean, it's just, that's... Now, welcome to Wisconsin. Anyway, Steven goes on to say, hopefully the Packers will be rested up and ready to go Sunday night in a game that I still fear that it will be a loss for the Packers, even though the Seattle Seahawks, they beat the 49ers 27-24. Wayne must have been feeling good of himself as he tied Scott with points that I didn't think he could be able to do. It will be interesting to see who will win and who will have to meet up with whom at Culver's to treat the winner to a Culver's meal. Well, either way, you're going to have to come here because you don't have any Culver's out by you. Oh, no, wait, did you say you got one?
No. That would be all over social media.
Yeah, I figured.
I'm surprised that they don't have any in California at least yet, but there's like 7 or 8 in Arizona, which isn't exactly a short drive, but, I know it's the next state over, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to get you out here. Either way, you're coming here, so you're going to have to deal with it. He goes on to say, I would not have given the Packers a grade higher than a B-, as I don't forget that the 2 losses they have gotten have come against 2 of the weaker teams, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Los Angeles Chargers. That's a really good point, actually. He goes on and says, I listen to the Packers Fan Podcast right on the website for the Packers Fan Podcast at www.packersfanpodcast.com. Think very carefully when you put your predictions in for the Niners game. I am checking out for now, and as always, can't wait to hear your thoughts on the podcast.
Also got an email from Caleb Fisher. Hello, Wayne and Scott. This is Caleb, Kathy, and Roy Fisher from Titletown, USA, a.k.a. Green Bay. It's great to have this bye week so we can recuperate from those previous games. And on the plus side, we've been dominating the field on both sides of the ball. So you combine those 2 things together, Scott, I think it's going to be good. A few things we could use help on is on the defensive side of the ball and protecting Aaron Rodgers. But all in all, we cannot wait for our Pack to play this Sunday. Go Pack, go.
Yeah, Caleb is a super fan for sure. He literally messaged us on Twitter while we're recording saying, hey, when's the podcast coming out? Recording it right now, man. It'll be later tonight. So he's chomping at the bit to hear us.
I'm chomping at the bit to get it out because that interview with Liz and those fantasy football tips, and she didn't quite say go Pack go, but she did say that she wouldn't say go Pack go.
So technically she did say go Pack go. So we're gonna go with that.
Oh, remember, after the Packers beat the Niners Sunday night, get in your voicemails because Scott is delirious, and we want to share them on the next episode of the podcast. Call us by 11 p.m. Central Sunday night. Call 920-3PACK-GO. In fact, call that every Sunday night. Thanks for your support and your feedback, and, of course, Go Pack Go. On our weekly Twitter poll, how do you think Sunday's Packers game will go? Will the Packers start fast and win big? Will the Packers start slow but come back to win the game? Or can you just say heart attack Pack? What say you?
Well, we had. I love that you didn't put a single option in there for the Packers, potentially losing the game. You didn't even give them the option.
Well, let me preface that by saying that in the Packers Fan Podcast Facebook community group at packerscommunity.com, I always leave the option open if somebody wants to add something. And this week, nobody did.
Nobody did. But I'm actually with the majority here who 58% said, can you say heart attack Pack? Because I think this is going to be a nail biter. I think this game is important for both teams because obviously the Niners want to hold that number 1 seed, and we want that number 1 seed. And it's just going to be, we're going to be fighting tooth and nail the whole game. I'm looking forward to it and not looking forward to it at the same time.
It's going to be tough to relax. I give you that. So 58%. Coming in second with 25% of the votes, the Packers will start fast and win big. Go Pack Go for that one. And 17% saying we will start slow but come back to win the game. And nobody added an option of not winning. So,
well, they're afraid of you, man. They're afraid of the wrath of Wayne Henderson.
Come on. People put things in there before.
Well, Terry did vote And she added, it's going to be a close game, but if the Pack can minimize the penalties and keep the foot on the gas and play smart, we have a good chance at winning this one. They are tough, but so are we.
And Jared foresees a shootout, especially if Kittle is back from his injury come game time, which the latest I hear, he's not back just yet. But then again, this is Wednesday nights, and the game is not all the way till Sunday night when the 8-2 Green Bay Packers play the no longer undefeated 49ers in Frisco, 7:25 p.m. Central. The Packers lead this series like many of the others, 36-30-1. In fact, Green Bay has won 5 of its last 6 at Niners. Not just at Green Bay, but at Niners, including the last trip in 2015 when we won 17-3. What do you think about that, Scott?
It makes me feel pretty good, but what's sad is that out of those games, the one I remember the most is the one we lost. I don't know if you remember this game, but
Nope.
Very, very near the end, I don't even remember who was throwing in San Francisco at that point, but final play of the game or near final play of the game, he stepped back from the line to call an audible and made a bow and arrow motion with his arms, like he was firing a bow and arrow, and scored on that play. And it would have been cool to be a Niners fan at that point because it was just a really cool football moment. But that was our one loss for sure.
It's never cool to be a Niners fan. Just saying.
Boy.
I mean, sure, the records say the Niners are 9-1, but they were totally gifted that game late again due to terrible officiating. Here's hoping the Packers will have better luck in Northern California than they did in Southern California the past 2 years. I don't know why. They came all the way to L.A., lost to the Chargers, came all the way to L.A., lost to the Rams, and both times the stadium was at least half green and gold. So, as always, there will be a large percentage of fans in the stadium up in Frisco wearing green and gold, and guaranteed, actually, because the SoCal Packer backers have a large group of their own heading up to NoCal, and so be listening for Go Pack Goes, especially if we get a substantial lead. And according to the Elias Sports Bureau, the last time the Packers entered a game this late in the season, through 10 games or later, where both teams had a winning percentage of 800 plus was way back in 2007 when Green Bay and Dallas both entered their matchup with 10-1 records.
And who won that game?
I'm sure it was the Packers, but I don't have the stats right here with me. It was so long ago. Doesn't matter.
Well, let me ask you this, though. How do you feel about the Niners coming in with that one loss now? Does that make you feel better, or do you think they're going to be coming out with more resolve and it's going to be tougher?
No, I don't think it will matter that much as far as the Niners go because, they did get that loss. And then last week, like Liz alluded to, the Cardinals were doing very, very well. Then there was that terrible penalty, actually a worse penalty than I've seen in any Packer game in at least a year. And
is that the one where the wrong player got flagged for pass interference?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't,
kind of ridiculous.
I don't understand the officiating. So
apparently they don't either.
And I just think the Niners, because they had their bye week so early, I keep seeing their injury report growing. And sure, they're at home, so obviously it's not going to be an easy game for the Packers by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think that we will show up with more than they can handle.
I sure hope so, man. Sure hope so.
Because having that number 1 or number 2 seed in the playoffs is going to be pivotal this year. The game time weather in Frisco, it's going to be nice. It's going to be clear, about 61 degrees Fahrenheit at kickoff, which is 16 degrees centigrade. So basically just nice. So with that in mind, what are some of your keys to the Packers getting their 9th win?
Well, the first thing I've got down here for keys of victory is that we need to spread the ball. The Niners secondary is a force to be reckoned with for sure, and the only way to beat them is to keep them on their toes. Not only does Rodgers need to look for multiple receivers, of which there are plenty, even though Liz said the twos aren't as strong as the ones, but we need to utilize the run game as well to even things out now that we've got a solid run game there with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams. Secondly, we need to get fundamental. This game is huge, and we have to win if we want a shot at the number 1 seed. We can't get too overeager, however, and we need to stick to the basics of solid defense and varied play calling. We may have a bit of a saving grace with the Niners having a tougher schedule the back half of the season, but there's no sense in keeping from striking while the iron is hot and taking that lead while we can. And finally, we got to protect Aaron Rodgers. There's one thing that the Niners fans have been expecting most games this season is that they'll get to the quarterback multiple times. That can't happen if we want the offense to fire on all 11 cylinders. See what I did there? All 11 cylinders. In order to pull this win off, that O-line needs to do everything they can to keep AR-12 on his feet for the majority of the game.
I think if the Packers do all those things, the victory will really be looking good for us.
I sure hope so.
So thanks for coming up with those and sharing those with us. We also got a good comment in the Packers Fan Podcast Facebook community page. Lofia says, hoping the Packers run the ball more, just like you said, Scott, against the 49ers and slow down their pass rush. The Packers defense got to play stingy and create a lot of turnovers. And help me out with the emojis there. What do we got?
We got a piece of cheese. We got a flexing arm. And we've got either a high five or a prayer symbol. I can't tell which one it is.
I believe that's praying. So
okay. And also, if you'd like to join the Packers Fan Podcast Facebook community and be a part of the conversation at packerscommunity.com, there's plenty of great conversations and posts, including our weekly post to discuss the games as it happens. You won't want to miss that.
Yeah, especially this week. It's going to be fired up. And Jared started a discussion about the Packers holiday wish list items and what you may want to consider putting on yours. And if you already have things on your wish list, share them in that post because it's great to know what other people are hoping for or buying themselves for Christmas.
Also, if you've ever wanted to relive that Panthers and Packers goal line stand in the snow, but do it in Lego style, it's in the group.
Can you imagine somebody even came up with that? I love it.
Yep.
It's hard to get Lego into snowflakes, but it's been done. Check it all out and more at packerscommunity.com.
Got some other chatter from the NFL. The refs ripped off the Broncos. We're talking about the refs so much this season. It's getting a little ridiculous.
I know. It is what it is, though. That Vikings game was well in the Broncos' hands.
Yep, it really was for the majority of the game, and then they just couldn't score in the second half.
And Scott,
Insane.
I appreciate the guide you posted in the group on Sunday of who we were supposed to root for and who we were supposed to root against. But basically all the teams the Packers needed help from this past weekend let us down. But at least the Packers are still in control of their own destiny.
And at least the Bears lost.
That's true. That is a huge plus.
Yeah. So where are the standings now, man?
Well, in the NFC North, the Packers still in first at 8-2. This is weird because of the bye week. It throws off all the math. Packers are 8-2. The Vikings are in second at 8-3. Bears are 4-6. That's not looking very good. And the Lions 3-6-1. Is that any good? No.
What happened to the Lions, man? That's it doesn't even make sense. This division was supposed to be super strong all around, and the Lions are just faltering.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you love to play video games as much as I do, please be sure to check out my other podcast, The Gaming Outsider, which can be heard at the same places you listen to this one. Shortly after this episode airs, it's available now. You can hear me talk about the latest Star Wars game from Respawn called Jedi Fallen Order. It is awesome. Spoiler alert. It's really, really good. Our website is thegamingoutsider.com.
And if you watch Castle Rock on Hulu, this week's episode of Castle Rock was a true mind blower. Be sure to subscribe to my Castle Rock Zone podcast to hear Jeff Gentry and I discuss the episode with the help of some great listener feedback. That is at castlerockzone.com. A huge thank you and go Pack Go to Bryant for his continued support of the show at the $24 Willie Wood pledge level. RELAX and Run the Table. We've got a brand new supporter channeling Aaron Rodgers at $12 American. Thank you and go Pack Go to Jared Mancini-Kerr. You rock. Also at the $12 a month level, our friends at the Texas-only Green Bay Packers Fanatics Facebook group. Go Pack Go and thank you so much.
We've also got a couple over at our $4 monthly Patreon support level, Jeff Summerfield and Lawrence Harvey. Also, Curly Lambeau, our $1 level podcast support. Special thanks to Joe Christensen, Matt Haig, Hank Davis from the TPE Network of Podcasts, and Aaron Peterson from The Hollywood Outsider. Check out how you too can financially support the podcast at a level to match your budget and even get some fun Packers Fan Podcast logo merch. Details at patreon.com/Packers Fan Podcast. Thanks so much and go Pack Go. Finally, we are the Unofficial Packers Fan Podcast, not yet affiliated with the NFL or the Green Bay Packers. Just saying, we'd love to be. You can contact us at media@packers PackersFanPodcast.com.
And follow us on Twitter at PackersFanPod. Follow Scott on Twitter at GoCastScott. Follow me on Twitter at Wayne Henderson. And join our Packers Fan Podcast Facebook community at PackersCommunity.com. Join the conversation, especially the live thread going on during the game this Sunday night.
And don't forget, get your feedback in by Sunday night at 11 p.m. Central. Go to PackersFanPodcast.com and click the Contact Us button for details. Thanks again so much for joining us on the Packers Fan Podcast. If you miss any details, just hit the back button about 30 seconds on your podcast player a couple times, and we'll say it again for you. Also, be sure to subscribe to in your podcast player of choice so you don't miss an episode. And finally, it's time for the Texas-only Green Bay Packers Fanatics group to lead us out of this episode, get us amped up and ready to root the Packers on for a victory over the hated Niners.
This is Dawn down here in Texas, a.k.a. Granny Cheese.
Hi, I'm James.
Hi, I'm Kim.
Hi, I'm Melissa.
Hi, I'm Susan.
Hi, I'm Carrie.
Hi, I'm Lisa Montgomery, and we want to say,
Go Pack, go!